Slow Medicine Radio. Our host is integrative medicine Dr. Michael Finkelstein. Michael offers medical advice from a holistic paradigm, including both medical and metaphysical philosophies from the full spectrum of human experience. Slow Medicine Radio offers fresh ideas on how to attain a state of wellness that seems distant given the limitations of today's medical paradigm. It introduces you to thought leaders who connect the dots between theory and practice, examining health from a broad perspective with regards to medical diagnoses, conventional and alternative therapies, healthcare policy, and related topics that warrant further thought and discussion. Slow Medicine Radio does not prescribe to take this or do that. Instead, it offers an open-minded, intelligent, and practical approach to living, resulting in greater health individually and collectively. Here is Dr. Michael Finkelstein, the founder of Sunraven, the home of slow medicine in Bedford, New York.
Well, welcome to Slow Medicine Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Michael Finkelstein, and we're here every Monday at 5 o'clock on 1460 AM and worldwide at WVOX.com. And the point of the show is to discuss health from a much broader perspective. And that's what I want to do with you today. I want to share with you some insights that I've learned from another health system, specifically Chinese medicine, and to talk about how we approached this particular season, fall, autumn, with an understanding relating to the nature, the natural cycle of the earth and the planet, and how that affects human beings as well. And I think by listening and understanding a little bit more of those principles, you could apply them and maybe have a really good fall this year. So I also want to invite you to call in and ask your questions along the way and share and participate in the show. The number is 914-636-0110. What I want to talk to you about today, I think, is relevant to everybody. And to cap it off with a phrase and a concept, in addition to Chinese medicine, I'm going to spin it toward the discussion about the difficulty people have in letting go. And that plagues us, not only emotionally, but physically. And as I see health, it's really an amalgam of both the mental, the emotional, the physical, as well as other things, the world around us, our communities, spirituality. But the mental, emotional, spirit, and physical connection is really tight. Just think about how you blush when you're embarrassed, or how you get nauseated if you see something upsetting, or you lose your appetite, or you start sweating when you get panicky. These are your body's physiological responses that happen almost immediately to an emotional state. And it goes on all the time. What's interesting to me when I went back to school to study integrative and holistic medicine was when you put on other lenses to understand and view the human condition, the human body a certain way, you realize that there's more to grasp, there's more to learn, and some of it is practical. Some of it actually can help you with your body. I mean, to some extent, we know the basic principles of rest and relaxation, dealing with stress, nutrition, movement. Obviously, those are all essential. But they're often viewed through the medical lens, which is, okay, what happens to your blood pressure? What happens to your heart rate? Is the food you're going to eat prevent cancer or help you deal with an illness? I want to talk about a qualitative aspect in terms of how you really feel when you wake up in the morning, and when somebody asks you, how are you doing? The answer to the question, I want you to be able to say, oh, gee, I feel that much better for some reason. I mean, obviously, I'm doing some of those other things that are typically prescribed, but I actually am embracing a way of living that is really helping me reach my potential and feel as good as I can, even with certain limitations, such as illness, disease, or age. So I want to talk about letting go, and I want to, again, talk to you from the perspective of what I've learned in Chinese medicine, which is a very big system and very important worldwide. If you think about it, in China alone, 1 billion people live, and the influence of Chinese medicine spread throughout Asia over thousands of years. And there are billions of people alive on the planet today, primarily because the medical system that they use is Chinese medicine. So there's a lot to appreciate about it. And even though it's very different than Western scientific reductionistic medicine, where we use microscopes and blood work and x-rays, there's something very holistic about Chinese medicine. And the reason is because it was based and rooted in the observation of the natural world. Thousands of years ago, without the equipment that we use today, Chinese doctors really basically had their own eyes and senses and their own intelligence to try to put two and two together and understand why people around them were either well or not well. And they didn't just look at people, they looked at the whole of nature and understood systems. So they could look at a forest, for instance, and say, gee, that forest looks healthy because of the variety of trees and the number of living trees versus dead trees and the number of organisms that live there, whether it's the trees and other plants and animals and insects and above ground and underground. It's pretty easy when you look at it from that point of view. You can see a healthy system. And so they looked at healthy systems and they compared them to unhealthy systems like ponds that were stagnant and full of crud, and, vast areas of desert, maybe on the outskirts of what should be otherwise inhabitable land. And they said, well, what's going on here? What's creating the system to be imbalanced? And they had some brilliant observations. One of the observations was that the seasons, the annual seasons that we see during the world are times when a naturally healthy system will do things differently at different times of the year. So in the spring, as an example, we recognize that things grow. There's the dormant period of winter, the season winter that precedes it, where things look like they're dead. Of course, we know they aren't, but they're quiet. There's no leaves on the trees. The grass is buried under snow. There's not a lot of rustling. The animals might be living in shelters or hibernating altogether. But then in spring, as day length increases, as the temperatures warm up, as the snows melt, you see a lot of activity in the earth, and you see this tremendous growth and movement. In summer, the fruits ripen, the trees and the animals reach their greatest weight. They've produced, and their offspring, whether that's an animal, vegetable, fruit, have grown and growing almost to a point of view of adulthood for most of what we observe. And then in the fall, like now, you see the beginning of that period of shedding, where the trees first beautifully, the leaves turn color, but then eventually the leaves are dropped and the trees let go of those leaves. So what I want to talk to you about today is this season fall, where what we observe in nature is this letting go phenomena, which is so prominent, particularly in the Northeast, where we live here at Slow Medicine at Sunraven in Bedford, and where the studios in New Rochelle are outside of New York City. We see now the beginning of this transition from the full abundance of summer to the colorful changes of autumn. We also notice the characteristic change in the air quality, where the moisture is pulled out of the air gets lighter, cooler, crisper. And the trees, of course, leaves turn colors, and within a few weeks, all these leaves, the abundance of the summer season, will fall. Well, so Chinese doctors saw that, and they said, gee, this healthy ecosystem, this healthy forest, was dependent on this annual cycle. And it makes sense. If the trees held on to those leaves after they've been fully used, they would get old and worn out, and there would be some stagnation. There would be difficulty because, there is something about the youth and the vitality of youth, especially when it comes to production. And this is something that was important for the Chinese practitioners to understand, because when they realized that a lot of people developed ailments, it was largely because they were holding on. Classic ailment is constipation. And you're holding on, right? You're holding on to the stuff that you've digested that's in your intestinal tract that's no longer really needed and it's ready to go. But for whatever reason, there are many conditions that create the symptoms complex of constipation, but people don't move their bowels and are constipated. Similarly, a partner organ of the colon in Chinese medicine is the lung. And of course, exhaling is the prototypical form of letting go. We breathe out the used air, the carbon dioxide that's been generated in our body. And when we breathe in, we get to refresh ourselves with more oxygen and fresher air. This is the principle. These two organs in particular, the lung and the colon, are most vulnerable during this season. A few weeks ago, when Hillary Clinton was diagnosed with pneumonia, I had a show, this was in early September, about why people tend to be susceptible to pneumonic processes, sinusitis as well, and upper respiratory tract illnesses. during this time of the year? Well, in part is because the changing air quality offers new things that float around in the air, and for many people who are sensitive, allergic-like, they'll get symptomatic. But for others, a lot of people get colds this time of year, bronchitis and pneumonia. The Chinese doctors realized that this was no accident. This time of the year is particularly important for the lung and the colon to be cleaned, and for human beings to then embrace and understand that that's the natural cycle and that they too can let go. Now, when we say letting go, what do we mean? We're breathing normally, and most of us try to move our bowels. Then reflect back to my comments about mind-body, and that there are other things to let go of than just the body materials that accumulate. And one of them is the memories of the past, the pain, relationships that are broken, among other things. And this is where people I know, and you probably know, have a difficult time sometimes moving on. And this is the time of the year to do that. So I want to take a break. I want to pause, and I want you to think about this part of the letting go phenomena, the emotional release, the stories that you hold on to, the opinions, and how, yes, they may be useful. Maybe you've learned from them, but maybe there's a natural cycle here where some of those things should go so that you can let go of these spent leaves, so that when the future seasons come, particularly the spring ahead, you're ready to really grow new limbs. So think about that. The number is 914-636-0110. Again, I invite you to call and to ask me a question or share in this conversation. And in a minute, we'll come back and we'll pick up the conversation. So think about that. Maybe take some good deep breaths, and we'll be back in a minute.
You're listening to Slow Medicine Radio. You can find out more about the show and the work of Dr. Michael Finkelstein by visiting his website, slowmedicinedoctor.com. Slow Medicine Radio is sponsored by the Slow Medicine Foundation, dedicated to providing community-centered, experiential, and reflective learning for individuals, families, and groups, offering educational programs, events, and resources, as well as insightful health evaluations with customized medical guidance. Dr. Finkelstein works with his wife, Robin Queen Finkelstein, at their farm, Sunraven, in Bedford, New York. And they invite you to visit and take advantage of this unique resource, including men's and women's groups and couples programs. If you think about it, much of what we experience when we don't feel well is a result of the fast world and how it affects us. Therefore, if fast is the disease, then slow is the medicine. Visit Sunraven, the home of slow medicine in Bedford, New York. Go to slowmedicinedoctor.com or call 914-218-3113. And thank you for tuning in Mondays at 5 p.m. right here on 1460 WVOX.
Well, welcome back to Slow Medicine Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Michael Finkelstein. And it is October, and we are beginning to see some of the beautiful annual changes in the trees this time of the year here in New York. And it always reminds me to appreciate nature. I'm a fan of warmer weather, so I really like holding on myself to this time of the year, knowing that the winter is only a few weeks or a few months away. But that's my habit. And in fact, I'm talking about exactly that sort of thing. We tend to hold on to the familiar, the comfortable. And when we hold on, we create for ourselves a form of resistance, which of course occasionally makes sense and is useful. But if we tend to hold on to things that we really don't have a choice about, we fight the seasons. We decide because we just don't like the winter, we're just not going to wear a coat when it's 20 degrees outside. Obviously, that doesn't make sense. We could choose to behave in terms of food choices and activity in the winter like we do in the summer, and that too may not make the most sense. This is what I see gets people into trouble. And instead of being into the rhythms and flows and the cycles of nature, we're spending a lot of energy maybe swimming upstream. And most important, this time of the year, we're not annually refreshing. We're not cleaning out our garage and our desks and our bookshelves and our cars the way they need to periodically so that they can be freshened up, made light for the period of the winter ahead of us, and then ready for the springtime beyond that. This is the story. This is the story that connects the mind and the body that I see creating medical disease. Yeah, I see this as contributing to what makes people ill. It's not that the cause of their disease is this, but their threshold, their vulnerability, the susceptibility to conditions is somehow affected by this holding on phenomena. One of the things that we tend to hold on to is being angry with somebody. You know, they've hurt us in some ways, and, you know, we have a hard time letting go of the story. And taking it one step further, you know, when the word forgiveness is offered as, well, maybe you should forgive and forget, you know, those comments, for many of you, when you hear them, how do you react? Think about it. Maybe you do bristle a little bit, and it irritates you for somebody to suggest to forgive a person for hurting you in that way. Everyone has their own stories. Some are pretty severe, of course. Some are a little bit easier to deal with. But just think about the struggles we can have with the concept of letting go and forgiveness. A sister to this forgiveness phenomenon and letting go is grief. When people around us pass away, when we lose parts of our body, let's say through medical treatments for a disease and condition, let's say part of our body is lopped off because of a disease, or we lose our youth, or we move, we let go of things. When we pack up our rooms to move, most people realize that there's sort of a pang of sadness. There's a nostalgia. There's memory, which is hard to move on from. Well, this, as I said, if not allowed to flow and flow out effectively, can lead to stagnation, and a stagnation state can lead to a medical condition like congestion in the lungs. This really happens. So what's the way I recommend people handle this with this observation, which is then to just periodically go through the motions of letting go. And this time of the year is when I think it's most effective, because this is what the natural world is doing. And if you do it at the same time the natural world is doing it, this is what the Chinese doctors have taught us, is that this is when it'll be most effective. Getting to the subject of forgiveness, I did read something that I wanted to share last week, as a matter of fact, that I thought was pretty poignant. And it's written by a man named Mark Nepo. Mark Nepo wrote a book, The Book of Awakenings. That was one of several books that he's written. And that was written after he went through his own process of dealing with cancer. He's quite an extraordinary human being. His story alone is enough. But what he was able to write and how he articulated his journey was really quite powerful. And one of the things he wrote was about forgiveness. And I want to read this to you, and I want to invite you to call me, share your thoughts on it, 914-636-0110. So this is what he wrote. The pain was necessary to know the truth. But we don't have to keep the pain alive to keep the truth alive. Let me read that again. The pain was necessary to know the truth. But we don't have to keep the pain alive to keep the truth alive. Can you relate that to something in your life where you're holding on to something that was painful? Maybe you haven't even thought about it. It's just natural to remember it and to have it around you, and where, but that you did learn something from that experience. And maybe you're having a hard time saying to yourself, I can move on from this. I could sort of maybe somehow live a little freer, because you're worried that if you get over it, the truth, the learning, the poignancy of, let's say, a relationship that was lost will be lost. Because if you don't feel the pain, then you won't feel the love. Does that sound familiar? To me, that has happened. And when I speak to people a lot, particularly people who lose loved ones or who learn from a hardship that they've experienced, let's say they were fired from a job, and they were told in that firing something painful, a truth. Let's say, you weren't really good at this particular job and you were fired, and that's hard to face. But you get immediately angry with this boss who fired you because it was painful. But you did learn the truth. Is there a way now to forgive that individual But hold on to the truth. The truth is that you've learned that, yes, maybe there's something you need to brush up on, to perform a little differently, to focus differently, that there was some kernel of truth. And the pain that you experience and the truth are really two separate things. And you could forgive the individual for pointing it out to you. The truth you can learn from, and you can separate those things and move on more effectively. Or you had a relationship which ended after, let's say, it was a really devoted relationship. Now you're divorced. Something similar has happened to you. You feel abused in some way. You feel the pain of the loss. And in that, there's also a truth perhaps that you somehow, and I'm not talking about all forms of abuse where you were truly a victim. Let's say in relationships where there was some mutual disconnect. There was some growing apart type phenomena which so many people report. And that, though painful, and though you can point to your partner and say he or she let you down, there's an aspect of truth about your own role in that process. Can you hold on to the truth, learn and grow from an honest reflection for yourself, and change how you respond to the other person in terms of the pain, neutralizing it? This will shift a lot of energy for you if you can. In any event, I think this is what Mark Nepo was getting at. And he was talking about his own cancer, that somehow the pain of the whole process had to wake him up for some reason. Maybe he was living his life out of balance. Maybe his commitment to relationships wasn't as sincere and earnest as it could have been. So that the close call with death got him not only scared, but aware of a truth. But to move on, if he was just literally scared and in pain and desperate, he couldn't focus on that truth because he would not have available all the energy he would need. So in his own growth, he realized that the pain pointed out to an important truth, but that the truth can remain his focus without more pain. This is a challenge for us. This is what the season of autumn is asking us to do. And if you have a hard time, as many people do with this, I would just simply suggest you go outside and you look at a tree. In a few weeks, what you'll notice is that the tree just simply, effortlessly lets go of those leaves. They're unnecessary. They've served their purpose. The tree has grown to the extent that it will this year. It's time for rest. It's time to move on. It's time to reprocess, repackage its energy so that when the opportunity for new growth presents itself next spring, it's ready and it has the available bandwidth. It has the minerals and the nutrients and the energy to grow. This is what nature does without thought. Humans are more complicated, of course, because we think so much. And in that thinking, we could go back and forth. You could even be debating right now whether what I'm saying makes sense or whether it even applies to you. And my only suggestion, as a Chinese doctor would offer, is, well, you're part of the natural world. And so if nature does it, why not try to flow with nature this particular season? See if it doesn't offer you something. Free up capacity. You could literally start by watching the trees. Or you can start by making a plan to clear out one aspect of your physical world. Let's say the desk, that you work on, or a closet, or your car, or the garage. Or maybe write letters to people who have had in your mind and your energy field sort of lingering presence, something uncomfortable, and write letters that might allow you to release some of the pain. Even in that letter, embrace the truth. This is what I've learned. The pain of our last encounter doesn't need to continue. Whatever it is that you do, mostly for yourself, can be a beautiful gift and prepare you, make it more likely that you're going to live to your fullest potential, both physically, but also mentally and emotionally. Because in our mind and our emotions is really where the quality of our life is most understood, most appreciated. Yes, our body has a lot to do with it, if our mind is clear, it will provide greater path for your body to do the same. And that's my wish for you during this season, is to find some clarity, like the air that just so naturally improves this time of the year as the heat and humidity from the summer dissipates. It doesn't have to require that much effort, just a slight intention, a little bit of a plan. I like the idea of writing or expressing yourself in some way, perhaps artistically. Just let go of something that you don't need, and every little bit will aggregate to the whole and provide you with something that I hope makes this season the best yet. So that's my wish for you today and for the week. If you'd like to visit us to do that practice together, we have an October festival, a harvest festival on October 22nd at Sunraven. Visit us then, visit the website to get more information, and I'll look forward to speaking to you next week. Take care.